He escaped 3 kidnappings in Iraq, yet his ideas went beyond borders. A special episode with Faisal Al Mutar, president of Ideas Beyond Borders, on MENA on the Map. Faisal, thank you so much for joining us at MENA on the Map, Season 2.
Thanks for having me. Hopefully one day we can do it in person.
It's we've been in Zoom meetings for a long time now, but we never had the time to sit and discuss with you your story, the story of Iraq. This is the first time that we sit without working plans and management tools, so we are able to finalize our project. So thank you so much for your time, and we're looking forward to a great episode with you. Faisal, inspired by one of your interviews today, I would like to ask you and start with this very simple question. How is Iraq after Saddam?
Not sure if that's a simple question, but Iraq, it depends a lot on really what part of the country you are in. So there are parts that got more developed, and there are parts that went underdeveloped. And the part that got more developed was liberated or protected, I would say, since the first Gulf War, which is the Kurdistan region. That is the province of Erbil, Suleimania, and Houk. And after the war in 2003, they had a really great progress when it comes to economy, when it comes to security, etc. And then there were the provinces, previously it used to be called the Muhafazat al-Bayda, which is the white provinces that were, most of them were Saddam headquarters, Saddam generals used to live. Many of these areas became really ISIS headquarters, and previously when I was in Iraq, it used to be Al-Qaeda headquarters. But then and Baghdad I would say, is the one that got the most damaged. That's where most of the militias and most of the concentration of power got located, being the capital of the country and also being the intersection of so many different provinces from different sects and different militias. So it's really, I do get that question a lot, and I think there is no easy answer, but it really depends on who was benefiting from the former regime, and obviously their life got much worse, and those who were not benefiting from the regime, and some of them, their life also got so much worse. So it really depends on who you're asking. That's why there's no one Iraq. There are probably 6 at least, and each one of them are having a very different post-war experience. And I'm sure with Lebanon, you could probably relate that there are multiple countries in the same country. And Iraq, I think Lebanon have a very similar approach to many of these things.
Faisal, I'd like to welcome you in my turn. Yara was very good in jumping directly to political questions, but I would love to hear your personal story. How you got to the US, how you managed to, if we can say, escape, what happened with you. Can you tell our audience your story? Because it's a very interesting story. I was reading about you, and we can say miraculously you managed to be where you are now.
Thank you. Well, unfortunately, in Iraq, the personal and the political intersect quite a lot. So it's.
I was about to say that.
It's hard to differentiate sometimes what's what. But on personal story, so I was born in a province south of Baghdad called Babylon, and that's where the good old Babylon that is mentioned in multiple religious books. But I grew up in Baghdad, where my parents moved when I was a kid, and we come from I would say a semi-educated family. My dad is an orthopedic surgeon, mom is a lawyer, and they both studied in the UK. And the reason I say that is because we moved to a neighborhood where at the time many of Saddam generals used to live, and it was built actually for kind of Saddam's justice or lack thereof justice folks, and it used to be called Hay Al-Adil, so the neighborhood of justice. And then there was one next to it called Hay Al-Muharibin, and that's where like lots of the kind of the generals used to live. And in 2003, so that's where the war happened, many of these people had to leave the country. They went to neighboring countries in Jordan and in Turkey and other places. And the neighborhood moved from a residential neighborhood to Al-Qaeda headquarters of West Iraq and West Baghdad. So my neighborhood is not that far from Fallujah and Ramadi, and that's where Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi and others have declared the Al-Qaeda of Iraq. So, so my neighborhood moved from residential to a terrorist hub. And my crazy self at the time, I grew up in kind of, by most accounts, a liberal, more moderate family. And I started speaking out against many of these extremists, most of the kind of the sectarianism that really started emerging more and more during the post-war experience. And I had multiple fake IDs that had different last names that show different sects, or because you can know someone's sect from their last name. So if somebody is like Musawi, means they're Shia. If someone is Tikriti, means they're Sunni. So there's a lot of, and then it's like the militias control most of the country. So you have to, whenever you pass a militia, you have an ID, one in your right hand, one in your left hand. And when the militia asks you, you have to be trained to show the ID that matches what the sect of the militia is. And as a result of that, as a result of really being outspoken and really being, I mean, I don't like to create, like, the threshold for receiving a death threat in Iraq is pretty low. So you don't really have to be very much outspoken or have to be like on the front lines to piss off many of these groups. I mean, Al-Qaeda threshold of what they consider to be kafir, or what can be considered to be like an enemy of the states, is a pretty low. So you can write like an art, like if you can post a blog post and you say something like, "Oh, women have rights," that might get you a death threat. So you don't really need, or you might get killed for it. So that's like how low the standard is to really end up being on a list or end up being targeted. And that would happen to me. So I as a result of being outspoken, and as a result of really my neighborhood being taken over by Al-Qaeda, my high school neighborhood being taken over by Al-Qaeda, I started becoming a target. I ended up, unfortunately, on a local death list in west of the country. And it was unfortunate that it was actually one of my colleagues in high school. His cousin was a member of Al-Qaeda. So that shows actually how deep many of these militias are in terms of they're part of society. They're not like something that is pretty on the outside. And there were like attempts of kidnapping. For some reason, I survived all of them, and I'm thankful to be alive.
I'm interested to know you survived 3 attempts, I think, of kidnapping. Can you tell us like how you managed to escape one of them?
Well, the one that I like mostly remember is that, so as I said, my neighborhood was taken over by them, and I was going to a store, actually, like pick up things for my mom, and they were coming, and they were like, I would say, like driving around the neighborhood, and then I believe they recognized me, and then they actually like opened the door, and they were coming to like get me, and that was at the same time a U.S. Humvee. So at the time, the U.S. military was in Iraq, and the U.S. Humvee was just driving around. So they actually were trying to get me, and then they had to run and get back to the car. So that was like really close of getting caught, except that there was a U.S. Humvee that was wandering around in my neighborhood that they, and then others were like more closer to my high school, which is not that far from the neighborhood that I used to live in. So it was all in the west part of Baghdad.
Faisal, we know you in FNF, we know you through IBB. We are working together on Bilarabi, but it's very interesting for the people who are following Bilarabi podcast and who are following FNF MENA to know about you personally. and the story behind IBB. You are now in New York, but your ideas went beyond borders. And still, with everything happened to you, while you are in New York, you are dedicating your life to bringing back democracy to Iraq, to bringing back knowledge to Iraq. And I was just saying lately, you've been sending back books to Mosul. So tell us more about Ideas Beyond Borders as a movement, as a foundation, and what are your plans now?
Sure. So maybe I could touch back a bit about, because in a way, like the story of IBB is connected to me growing up in Iraq. So one of the things that really happened in Iraq is that we used to have two state-controlled media. One is owned by Saddam, and the other one is by his son. And then we moved from two state-run media to 1,000 television stations and radio stations, etc. So we transitioned, I say, from like 1984 to Brave New World. We moved from state-controlled truth to post-truth, in a way that you don't know really what is the truth. And so that is like the ecosystem of information that, unfortunately, many Iraqis, and including myself, grew up in that country. And it's generally been my dedication, even when I was a teenager, is to really make inaccessible information accessible. And that is the mission of the organization that I started, Ideas Beyond Borders, is to really institutionalize a lot of the efforts within the Arab world to make, not only there is very little online content in Arabic, there is very little factual online content in Arabic. And our goal is to really diversify the ecosystem of information that people have access to. And that includes digital work and physical. And with digital, we are a partner of Wikipedia, Wikipedia Arabic. We have added by now roughly 30 million words to the Arabic Wikipedia. That's roughly about 25,000 articles. We've translated a couple of books, and we do physical work. And as of last year, we got a request from the University of Mosul, which is one of the universities that, well, Mosul is the place that ISIS declared the caliphate at. That's where the famous Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi speech was in Mosul. Yeah. And the university got destroyed as a result of ISIS, as a result of the war against ISIS. And there are a lot of efforts for reconstruction and rebuilding that university, but the library doesn't have books. So they have requested from us and they have provided us with a list of books that they would like. And mostly some of them academic, some of them actually about liberal thoughts and Enlightenment thought. So we donated to them by now 4,000 books. We provided them with computers, printers, and access for them to be able to access journals and be exposed to the world. So that is like some of the efforts that we do on the grounds, on the universities, and our effort actually to rebuild many of the libraries that ISIS destroyed and create that and the movement of knowledge that need to happen in that region.
Faisal, you obviously describe what you do on your website. Ideas Beyond Borders isn't just a nonprofit, it's a movement. Can you tell us who is helping you in this movement to achieve what you're looking for, and why you insist on education, restoring libraries to bring back Iraq to where it was before these terrorist organizations came in?
Sure. So one of the things that really happened as a result of, I would say, like being in the scene for a while, especially in the activist scene. And one of the things that I first started when I started the organization is to meet with a lot of the social leaders, not just in Iraq, but really across the Middle East and North Africa. And there is a great potential, and there is that's where I'll say the movement comes in, is that there are a lot of people who are sick and tired of authoritarianism and extremism, and they're looking for an alternative. And we have seen them in the protests in Iraq. We've seen some of them protests in Lebanon and other places who, and most importantly, especially in the areas that ISIS used to control. And I've had multiple conversations. We have a very big presence in many of these areas in which people have tried the authoritarian socialist regimes. They have tried the religious extremists, and they don't want either of them. And they're looking for something alternative. They're looking for, in most cases, can be described with the values of the Enlightenment. And with that, we're able to, through our movement and our following and subscribers is in constant growth. So we started, as a result of that, meeting with some of these social leaders with 3 million subscribers in the first couple of months when we started, and now we reached to 4.8 million. And we are almost in a growth of somewhere between 50 to 100,000 new subscribers a month for people who follow our content, read our content. Last year, we have received somewhere between, I think, 35 million views to some of our videos. We have expanded our video capacity. We now have a mini production company inside IBB. And we hired like some of the voice night of National Geographic and some other folks, and to really produce high quality content that the Arab world lacks. And I think it's available in all these different languages. And I think is that there is nothing that really stops the Arab world from adopting these ideas and even producing them. And with FNF, we have featured a lot of these individuals who are believers in liberal thought, who can be really positive role models for society, and that it can inspire more and more movements to be in the MENA region.
Philip, by the way, what Faisal is talking about is very interesting, because also while monitoring the podcast بالعربي, the majority of the listeners are from Iraq. So the people in Iraq, they really want to hear an alternative discourse. They need an alternative narrative. Sorry. And I think you are able to provide them with this. Also, before the interview, you showed me a book that you developed recently in Ideas Beyond Borders.
Yeah, so this is one of the books. This is one of our latest release, which is in partnership with an organization called the Heterodox Academy. And what they have done is that they have produced a graphic novel of John Stuart Mill on liberty. And with us, we have partnered with them. And this is actually one of our first graphic novels that we will partner with local bookstores inside Iraq. And actually, we have a conversation with a bookstore in Lebanon. They actually print and make this book available physically. But the book is, all of our content is available for free to download digitally. So we are first, in terms of distribution, we rely a lot on digital distribution for a lot of reasons. One of the main ones is really circumventing censorship. As you know, in the region, there are a lot of laws, not very intelligent laws, when it comes to censoring content. And also, because of the Arab world is not really, it's a very vague term. Each country has its own regulations when it comes to publishing. So if there's a book that's publishing in Beirut, it might be very difficult to get it published in Iraq or get it published in Egypt, because each country has its own. So there's very little regional publishing houses. And that's where the internet comes in, because it circumvents many of these borders. And that's where Ideas Beyond Borders, the name matches in terms of we can actually circumvent most of the censorship, and these ideas go beyond borders.
You know, Yara, when I see what Faisal is doing, I can remember one person who was recently killed 1 year ago, Hisham Al-Hashimi. Yes. Who was working on publishing studies, on studying how these organizations think and act, to let us understand this and to fight this in culture, in writings, in studies. So in a way, do you consider what you're doing? You're honoring people like Dr. Hisham Al-Hashimi and others who were victims of their thoughts, of their freedom in writing and expressing their ideas?
Yeah, so Hisham Al-Hashimi was a hero, and I
knew him personally. He visited Beirut twice, and I'm very sad that we lost him this way.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I didn't get the honor of meeting him, and he is much more braver than me, because and he was on probably we share, if there's one thing me and he share in common, is that we are hated by the same people. And he was brave enough to stay in the country and not leave to a more safer place. And that is the high cost. I mean, I really like even when a lot of our work in Mosul, and one of the heroes, which we featured in Bil Arabi, was a person who used to download and spread poetry and art during ISIS control. And he used to print some of these articles and some of these books on the printed at his house. And he used to go to his students when ISIS was controlling his hometown, and he was spreading that knowledge, even though the punishment that if he was caught in that time was death. And there are a lot of stories of really bravery that I think most of them go unheard because lots of the focus is on the bad things that are happening in the Middle East, not some of the good things and the heroes that without them, the Middle East would go to 7,000 years of time travel. So Hisham is definitely one of the, I would love one day that he gets a statue in Iraq. And other than the statues of some of the thugs we have from Qasim Soleimani and others who really destroyed the country, not made it better.
Between your story, the story of IBB, and the story of Iraq, Faisal, last few words, what will bring back Iraq and what will bring back democracy to Iraq?
Very good question. What will bring back Iraq is a development of the redevelopment of the Iraqi identity. Iraq has been amazingly fractured, and there is very much little sense of what it means to be an Iraqi in the first place. Prior to the Saddam and prior to many of the conflicts we had, there was a very kind of clear definition of Iraq that transcended sectarian identity, transcended political identity, that many of the people cared about the country because they cared about the country. And after the past 4 years, that identity has been really ruined and destroyed and divided. And I think is that what will bring it back is the return of to the Iraqi identity away from sectarian and political identities. I think that's very essential for Iraq to be Iraq, because now we don't have much of Iraq. What we have is Iran-controlled Iraq in the south, chaos in the west, Kurdistan regional government that is pretty much barely responds to the federal government of Iraq. They do their own thing as if they are a separate country. And that cannot, it's very unsustainable. And I think is that what needs to be done is really a lot of civics education, a lot of, and also openness to the world, more free markets, more connection to liberal education and liberal universities for us to be able to match that 21st century knowledge and not live in the dark ages.
Faisal, I would like to thank you for being with us. I believe that your story inspires a lot of young people in the region and is a way to help them contribute in their community while bearing in mind their dreams, aspirations, and most importantly, their mental health. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Faisal.